The bridge of the Galactic Confederation flagship hummed with quiet efficiency as Admiral Zixter reviewed the morning reports. His crystalline features reflected the blue glow of the command displays, while his four eyes tracked multiple data, streamed simultaneously. The third sector had been peaceful for decades, which made the sudden appearance of an unknown vessel all the more interesting. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the U.S. Liberty, watching the massive alien fleet through the main view screen. His weathered face showed calm determination despite the overwhelming odds. 15 alien warships surrounded his single exploration vessel, each one easily 3 times the size of his ship. The gray streaks in his hair caught the light from the console displays as he turned to his chief engineer. "Lisa, what's our status?" he asked quietly. Lisa Martinez looked up from her engineering station, her dark eyes focused and alert. "All systems green, Captain. The slip space drive is ready if we need to leave quickly. Hull integrity is at 100%, and our defensive systems are online." The alien admiral had sent a communication request an hour ago, demanding that the human vessel prepare for inspection. Sullivan had responded politely, explaining that they were peaceful explorers from Earth on a scientific mission. The response from Admiral Zixter had been less than friendly. "Primitive species will submit to Confederation authority," the alien commander had declared in heavily accented but understandable English. "Your vessel will be boarded and your technology evaluated for compliance with galactic safety standards." Sullivan had declined just as politely, which seemed to surprise the alien admiral. Most species apparently surrendered immediately when faced with Confederation firepower. Humans, however, had never been particularly good at following that pattern. Admiral Zixter studied the human vessel through his ship's advanced sensors. The design was crude by Confederation standards, with thick armor plating and what appeared to be primitive fusion engines. The ship looked more like a flying brick than a proper starship. How these beings had managed to achieve faster-than-light travel with such basic technology puzzled him. "Science Officer Rixandra," he called to his subordinate, a tall being with silver skin and elongated features. "What can you tell me about their propulsion system?" Dr. Rixandra manipulated her controls with 6-fingered hands, her large eyes studying the readouts. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, Admiral. They appear to be using some form of exotic matter manipulation, but the power levels are inconsistent with known physics." The Admiral's confidence remained unshaken. Every species they had encountered followed the same basic principles of spaceflight. Antimatter engines, quantum field generators, and neural navigation systems were universal constants. These humans might have stumbled onto something unusual, but they were still bound by the fundamental laws of reality. "Prepare for a demonstration," Admiral Zixter ordered. A simple microjump should show them the futility of resistance. His navigation officer, an insectoid being named Kelton, began the hyperspace calculations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The flagship would perform a short-range teleportation, appearing directly behind the human vessel in a position that would make escape impossible. It was a standard intimidation tactic that had worked on every species they had encountered. Captain Sullivan watched the alien flagship begin to glow with energy buildup. His tactical officer, Commander Amy Peterson, recognized the signs immediately. "Captain, they're charging what looks like a hyperspace drive. Energy patterns suggest a microjump." "Danny, plot us an evasive course," Sullivan said to his navigator. "Lieutenant Danny Walsh. Nothing too dramatic. Just get us clear of whatever they're planning." Walsh's fingers moved across his controls with practiced ease. "Course plotted, Captain. Ready on your command." The alien flagship completed its calculations and vanished in a flash of twisted spacetime. For exactly 3 seconds, Admiral Zixter felt satisfied with his tactical brilliance. His ship had materialized in perfect position, trapping the primitive. human vessel between his guns and the rest of his fleet. Then his sensors registered. Something impossible. The human ship was gone. "Report," Admiral Zixter demanded, his voice carrying the first hint of confusion. Kelton's mandibles clicked nervously as he studied his displays. "Sir, the human vessel has moved 3 kilometers to starboard. No hyperspace signature detected. No energy discharge recorded. They simply relocated." Captain Sullivan looked around his bridge as if nothing unusual had happened. "Nice work, Danny. Smooth as always." Walsh grinned and leaned back in his chair. "Thanks, Captain. Barely had to adjust the local field parameters. These aliens seem to rely heavily on conventional space-time manipulation." Admiral Zixter stared at his tactical display in growing bewilderment. According to every sensor on his ship, the human vessel had moved 3 kilometers instantaneously without using any detectable form of propulsion. The feat was not just improbable, it was theoretically impossible. "Science officer, explain what just occurred." He ordered. Dr. Rixandra ran every diagnostic protocol she knew, checking and rechecking her instruments. "Admiral, our sensors are functioning perfectly. The human ship appears to have relocated without generating any hyperspace, distortion, subspace wake, or quantum signature. According to our readings, it simply stopped existing in one location and began existing in another." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Every member of the alien crew had spent decades studying the immutable laws of physics. Faster-than-light travel required hyperspace entry. Moving through normal space required reaction mass or field manipulation. What the humans had just done violated every principle they understood. Captain Sullivan opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. His face appeared on Admiral Zixter's main screen, showing a slight smile that the alien found oddly unsettling. "Admiral, I hope we didn't startle you," Sullivan said in a friendly tone. "We're still interested in peaceful contact, but we prefer to maintain a safe distance during first meetings. I'm sure you understand." Admiral Zixter composed himself quickly, drawing on years of command experience. "Human vessel, explain your propulsion method immediately." Sullivan looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Propulsion method, sir?" "We just moved. Is there something specific you'd like to know about our navigation systems?" The alien admiral felt his confidence beginning to crack. In 30 years of commanding starships, he had never encountered a species that treated the fundamental forces of the universe as optional suggestions. These humans had just performed a maneuver that should have been impossible, and their captain was acting as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Prepare secondary formation," Admiral Zeiser ordered his fleet. "We will determine the extent of their capabilities." As his ships moved into new positions, the Admiral couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to discover something that would change everything he thought he knew about space travel. The human vessel hung motionless in space, waiting patiently for his next move, and somehow that patience was more unsettling than any threat could have been. Admiral Zixter paced the length of his command bridge, his crystalline features reflecting the warning lights that had begun flashing across multiple stations. The human vessel continued to drift peacefully 3 kilometers away, apparently unaware that it had just shattered everything the Galactic Confederation knew about space travel. "Captain Velinari," the Admiral called into his communication system, "report to the bridge immediately." Within minutes, the slim form of his best scout pilot materialized on the bridge. Captain Velinari possessed the enhanced reflexes and spatial awareness that made her species ideal for reconnaissance work. Her large eyes could track dozens of moving objects simultaneously, and her reaction time was measured in microseconds rather than the standard milliseconds of most beings. "Admiral, you summoned me," she said with military precision. "I want you to take your scout ship and perform a detailed scan of that human vessel. Admiral Zixter ordered. Use active sensors, full spectrum analysis, and maintain close approach. Patterns. I need to understand what we're dealing with. Captain Velinari studied the tactical display showing the human ship. Sir, are you certain this is wise? If they possess technology we don't understand, close approach could be dangerous. The Admiral's 4 eyes focused on his subordinate with unwavering intensity. Captain, I have commanded fleets for 3 decades. I have encountered 47 different species and analyzed countless variations of faster-than-light technology. There is no such thing as physics that we don't understand. Only physics that we haven't properly measured yet. Velinari nodded and departed for her ship, though something in the Admiral's tone suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Within 10 minutes, her sleek scout vessel detached from the flagship and began moving toward the human. Ship at combat speed. Captain Sullivan watched the approaching alien craft through his viewscreen, while sipping coffee from a ceramic mug that bore the faded logo of the Earth Space Exploration Service. The scout ship was beautiful in its efficiency, all smooth curves and integrated systems that spoke of advanced engineering principles. They're coming in fast, Commander Peterson reported from her tactical station. That ship is built for speed and maneuverability. Definitely military grade. Any hostile intent? Sullivan asked calmly. Negative, Captain. They're running active scans, but no weapons are charged. Looks like they want a closer look at us. Lieutenant Walsh turned from his navigation console with a slight grin. Captain, should I give them something interesting to look at? Sullivan considered this while taking another sip of coffee. Nothing too dramatic, Danny. We don't want to frighten them. Just show them that we're not entirely predictable. The alien scout ship approached to within 500 meters, its sensors working at maximum capacity to penetrate the secrets of human technology. Captain Velinari watched her displays with growing fascination as the readings defied every principle she had learned in pilot training. The human vessel appeared to be generating a localized distortion field that bent space around it in impossible ways. According to her instruments, the ship existed in a bubble of altered physics where different rules applied. More disturbing was the realization that this field seemed to be created by sheer force of will rather than any detectable technology. Is Scout 1 to flagship? She reported over the communication channel. Admiral, these readings make no sense. The human ship appears to be surrounded by a reality distortion that shouldn't be possible to generate or maintain. Admiral Zixter's voice crackled back with barely controlled frustration. Captain, there is no such thing as reality distortion. Check your instruments and try again. Before Velinari could respond, the human ship did something that made her question her own sanity. The vessel simply turned 90 degrees to port without any visible means of propulsion, acceleration, or concern for the laws of inertia. The maneuver was executed so smoothly that her instruments barely registered it as movement at all. Admiral? She called with a slight tremor in her voice. The human ship just performed a 90-degree turn at approximately 15% light speed without generating any inertial stress. Signatures. The silence from the flagship lasted exactly 17 seconds before Admiral Zixter's voice returned with dangerous calm. Repeat that report, Captain. Sir, the human vessel changed course 90 degrees while maintaining significant velocity. No reaction mass was expelled, no field generators activated, no gravitic compensators engaged. They simply decided to go in a different direction and did so. Captain Sullivan noticed the alien scout ship had stopped moving and was now maintaining a fixed distance. I think we confused them, Danny. Maybe we should try something a little more conventional. Walsh consulted his navigation display with the expression of someone solving a mildly interesting puzzle. How about a simple loop, Captain? Nothing too fancy, just a basic 3-dimensional curve. Sounds perfect. Execute when ready. The UE's Liberty began what any human pilot would recognize as a standard evasive maneuver, curving through space, in a graceful arc that would bring it around behind the alien scout. For Captain Velinari, watching this maneuver was like seeing mathematics itself break down and weep. The human ship's trajectory defied orbital mechanics, ignored momentum conservation, and treated gravitational fields as optional suggestions. The vessel moved through space like a fish swimming through water, changing direction and speed with fluid grace that made her own ship look clumsy by comparison. "Admiral, they're performing maneuvers that violate basic physics," she reported, her professional composure beginning to crack. "Their ship is moving in patterns that should create massive structural stress, but my sensors show no internal strain at all." Admiral Zixter watched the tactical display from his command chair, his hands gripping the armrest so tightly that his knuckles had turned a pale blue color. "Pursue them, Captain. Use every trick you know. I want to see the limits of their capabilities." Captain Velinari engaged her ship's most advanced propulsion systems, pushing her scout craft to performance levels that would have impressed any pilot in the Confederation fleet. Her vessel responded with the precision of a finely tuned instrument, accelerating and turning with mechanical perfection. That the human ship responded by doing something that Captain Sullivan's tactical officer would later describe in her log as showing off. The USS Liberty began moving in a figure-8 pattern while simultaneously rotating on 3 different axes, creating a display of spatial awareness that should have been impossible for any pilot to coordinate. "They're playing with us," Velinari realized with growing horror. "Admiral, this isn't a chase. They're demonstrating that our best efforts are inadequate." The breaking point came when the human vessel performed what Lieutenant Walsh called a handbrake turn, spinning 180 degrees while maintaining forward momentum, then reversing direction so quickly that Velinari's scout ship overshot by several thousand kilometers before she could react. Captain Sullivan's voice came over the communication channel with friendly concern. "Alien vessel, are you experiencing difficulty with your navigation systems? We noticed you seemed to overshoot your intended course. We'd be happy to provide assistance if needed." Admiral Zixter listened to this offer of help from beings who had just made his best pilot look like a student on her first training flight. His worldview, carefully constructed over decades of military service, began showing the first serious cracks. Captain Velinari returned to the flagship immediately. He ordered in a voice that sounded hollow even to himself, as the scout ship limped back toward the fleet. Admiral Zixter stared at the human vessel that continued its peaceful drift through space. These beings had just demonstrated technology that rendered his entire fleet obsolete, and they were offering technical assistance to help his ships navigate better. The most terrifying part was that they seemed completely unaware of how impossible their achievements were. Admiral Zixter stood in the center of his bridge, watching Captain Velinari's scout ship dock with trembling movements that suggested his best pilot was badly shaken. The human vessel remained exactly where it had been, drifting peacefully, as if mocking the entire Galactic Confederation fleet with its casual presence. "Admiral," Dr. Rixandra called from her science station, "I'm receiving a transmission from the human ship." "Put it on screen," he ordered, though part of him dreaded what these impossible beings might say. Next, Captain Sullivan's weathered face appeared on the main display, his expression showing genuine concern. "Admiral, we noticed your scout pilot seemed distressed during our encounter. Is everything all right? We're not familiar with your species' physiology, but we'd be happy to provide medical assistance if needed." The alien admiral stared at the human captain for several long seconds before finding his voice. "Your offer is noted, but unnecessary. However, I am curious about your vessel's capabilities. Your maneuvers appear to violate several fundamental principles of physics." Sullivan looked puzzled by this statement. "I'm not sure what you mean, Admiral. We were just doing basic evasive patterns. Nothing too complicated. Nothing too complicated. Admiral Zixter repeated slowly, feeling something crack inside his chest that might have been his sanity. Captain, your ship performed 90-degree turns at significant fractions of light speed without generating any detectable reaction force. Well, yes, Sullivan replied, as if explaining something obvious. To a child, that's how ships turn. Was there something unusual about our navigation? Before Admiral Zixter could formulate a response that wouldn't sound like the ravings of a madman, his tactical officer interrupted with urgent reports. Sir, we're detecting another human vessel, approaching from the outer system. The second ship materialized on their sensors without any of the usual hyperspace signatures that announced faster-than-light arrival. The U's defiance appeared as suddenly as if someone had simply decided it should exist in that particular location, and made it so. Captain Ron Hayes contacted the Liberty from his bridge, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone completely unaware that he had just violated causality itself. Jake, good to see you're making new friends. How are our alien neighbors treating you? Pretty well, Ron, Sullivan replied cheerfully, though they seemed confused about our ship handling. I think they might be used to more rigid navigation systems. Admiral Zixter listened to this casual conversation between captains, who treated impossible technology as routine equipment, while his own understanding of reality continued its steady collapse. 2 human ships now hung in space near his fleet, both of them representing violations of physics so fundamental that their very existence should have been impossible. Enough, he declared, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command. Both human vessels will submit to immediate containment. I am deploying gravitational inhibitors. He turned to his fleet commander. Signal all heavy cruisers. Formation. Epsilon 7. Full inhibitor deployment around both human ships. 3 massive Confederation cruisers moved into position with mechanical precision, each one bristling with the most advanced containment technology available to galactic civilization. The ships formed a perfect triangle around the human vessels, their hulls glowing with the distinctive blue light of charging gravitational inhibitors. Captain Sullivan watched the alien maneuvers with mild interest, while his communications officer, Lieutenant Karen Brooks, monitored the energy buildups. Captain, they're generating some kind of localized gravity field. Looks like they're trying to create a containment zone. Interesting approach, Sullivan mused. Danny, what do you think? Lieutenant Walsh studied his navigation displays with the expression of someone examining a mildly challenging crossword puzzle. Standard gravitational inhibitor pattern, Captain. Pretty basic stuff. Should be easy enough to work around. Captain Hayes contacted them from the Defiance, with obvious amusement in his voice. Jake, are they really trying to trap us with artificial gravity wells? That's almost cute. The alien inhibitors reached full power, creating overlapping fields of twisted spacetime that should have made any form of movement impossible. The trap was perfect by every standard known to galactic science, generating gravitational forces that no conventional drive system could overcome. Admiral Zixter felt a moment of satisfaction as his sensors confirmed the inhibitor fields were functioning flawlessly. Now we will see the limits of their technology, he announced to his bridge crew. Both human ships simply ignored the gravitational trap completely. The UES Liberty drifted upward out of the containment field as if the massive gravitational forces were nothing more than a gentle breeze. The U's Defiance performed a lazy barrel roll while accelerating away at an angle that should have been blocked by 3 separate gravity wells operating at maximum power. Impossible, whispered Dr. Rixandra, staring at her instruments in shock. The inhibitor fields are operating at 112% efficiency. Nothing should be able to move within those parameters. Define nothing. Admiral Zixter said in a voice that sounded dangerously calm. Sir, the gravitational forces we're generating would prevent movement by any known propulsion system. The human ships are acting as if our inhibitors don't exist at all. Captain Hayes opened a communication channel to the alien flagship, his face showing polite confusion. Admiral, are you folks having technical difficulties? We're reading some unusual gravitational fluctuations from your ships. Our sensors show potential engine problems that might need attention. Admiral Zixter found himself unable to speak for nearly 30 seconds while his bridge crew exchanged increasingly nervous glances. The humans were offering technical assistance for the very systems that should have been containing them. How? He finally managed to ask. How are you moving through our inhibitor fields? Captain Sullivan appeared on screen alongside Hayes, both humans looking genuinely puzzled by the question. Inhibitor fields? You mean those gravity distortions? We just compensated for them. Basic navigation stuff. Compensated, Admiral Zixter repeated in a hollow voice. Sure, Hayes said cheerfully. Our ships adjust local physics parameters to maintain optimal movement characteristics. Standard equipment on any human vessel. Before the alien admiral could process this casual destruction of everything he thought he knew about spaceflight, Captain Hayes did something that pushed him completely over the edge of rational thought. The UES Defiance split into 3 identical copies of itself. Admiral Zixter's tactical display now showed 6 human ships where moments before there had been 2. Each copy registered as completely solid and functional, according to every sensor his fleet possessed. The readings showed 6 separate fusion reactors, 6 different quantum signatures, and 6 individual crews. Ron show off much. Captain Sullivan sighed with obvious amusement. Hayes grinned from all 3 versions of his ship simultaneously. Sorry, Jake. Couldn't resist. These aliens seemed so surprised by basic maneuvers that I thought I'd give them something really interesting to look at. Admiral Zixter stared at his displays, showing impossible readings while his command staff began backing away from their stations, as if the instruments themselves had become dangerous. His voice, when he finally found it again, came out as barely more than a whisper. Science officer, please tell me that our sensors are malfunctioning. Dr. Rixandra checked and rechecked her readings with trembling hands. Admiral, all instruments are operating within normal parameters. We are detecting 6 human vessels, 3 of which appear to be identical copies of the same ship. The alien. Admiral sat down heavily in his command chair and stared at the tactical display with the expression of someone watching his entire understanding of the universe reveal itself as an elaborate practical joke. Signal the fleet, he said in a voice that seemed to come from very far away. Maintain distance. Do not engage. Do not approach. Do not even look directly at them unless absolutely necessary. Captain Hayes merged his 3 ships back into one with the same casual ease he had used to create them, completely unaware that he had just broken the last fragments of an alien admiral's sanity. Admiral Zixter sat in his command chair staring at the tactical display, while his hands gripped the armrests with enough force to leave permanent indentations in the metal. 6 human ships hung in space around his fleet, though his instruments insisted that 3 of them were somehow the same vessel existing in multiple locations simultaneously. Admiral, his communications officer called with obvious nervousness, the human captain is requesting a formal meeting. The alien commander closed all 4 of his eyes and took several deep breaths before responding. Which human captain? Captain Sullivan from the original vessel, sir. He suggests meeting aboard our flagship to discuss what he calls mutual understanding and cultural exchange. Admiral Zixter considered this request while watching Captain Hayes casually merge his 3 ships back into one, as if reorganizing reality was no more complicated than rearranging furniture. The thought of having these impossible beings aboard his ship filled him with dread. But his duty as a Confederation officer demanded that he attempt to understand what he was dealing with. Inform Captain Sullivan that we will meet in conference. Room Alpha in 1 hour, he decided. Standard diplomatic protocols. Captain Sullivan materialized in the alien flagship's transporter room exactly 1 hour later, accompanied by Chief Engineer Lisa Martinez and a tall man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Dr. Paul Henderson, their xenobiologist. The three humans looked around the advanced alien technology with obvious interest but no particular surprise, as if teleportation across space was something they encountered regularly. Admiral Zixther met them in the conference room that had hosted diplomatic encounters with 47 different species over the past 3 decades. The chamber was designed to impress visitors with its elegant architecture and subtle displays of Confederation power. The humans glanced around appreciatively, but seemed more interested in the alien delegation than intimidated by their surroundings. "Admiral, thank you for agreeing to meet with us," Captain Sullivan said as they took seats around the polished table. "We're always eager to establish friendly relations with new civilizations." The alien admiral studied the three humans across. From him, trying to reconcile their ordinary appearance with the reality-breaking technology they wielded so casually. "Captain Sullivan, I will be direct. Your ships have demonstrated capabilities that violate fundamental laws of physics. I need to understand how this is possible." Sullivan looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "I'm sorry, Admiral, but I'm not sure what you mean by violating physics. Our ships operate according to standard principles. Could you be more specific about what seems unusual?" Dr. Rixandra leaned forward from her position beside the Admiral, her silver features reflecting the conference room lights. "Captain, your vessels have moved through space without generating reaction mass, ignored gravitational inhibitor fields, and created multiple copies of themselves. These actions are scientifically impossible." Dr. Henderson smiled with the patience of someone explaining a simple concept to bright children. "I think there might be some confusion about the nature of physics itself. You're operating under the assumption that there's only one set of physical laws, but that's not actually true." Admiral Zixther felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Explain." "Well," Dr. Henderson continued cheerfully, "physics is really just a description of how reality behaves under specific conditions. Most species discover one set of rules and assume that's all there is. Humans learned early on that reality is much more flexible than that." Engineer Martinez added, "Our ships don't violate physics, Admiral. They just use different physics. We convince local space-time to operate according to rules that are more convenient for whatever we're trying to accomplish." The alien delegation stared at the humans in stunned silence, while Captain Sullivan nodded, as if his colleagues had explained something as basic as how to operate a door handle. "It's really quite straightforward once you understand that the universe is willing to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Admiral Zixter repeated in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere far away. "Exactly," Dr. Henderson said enthusiastically. "Reality isn't nearly as rigid as most civilizations assume. If you approach it with the right mindset, you can usually work out alternative arrangements that better suit your needs." Dr. Rixandra's voice trembled slightly as she asked, "How did your species discover this flexibility?" "Survival necessity, mostly," Dr. Henderson explained. "Humans evolved on a planet where the impossible happened regularly. We learned to fly, despite being heavier than air, communicate across vast distances without direct connection, and heal from injuries that should have been fatal. When we reached space, we simply applied the same principles." Captain Sullivan leaned back in his chair with the relaxed posture of someone discussing weekend hobby projects. "When our scientists first encountered the supposed limitations of faster-than-light travel, they just refused to accept them. They figured if something should work, It probably does work somewhere in the infinite possibilities of quantum mechanics. So we developed technology based on finding those possibilities and making them locally real, Martinez added. Basic stuff, really. Most human kids learn the principles in high school physics class. Admiral Zixter felt his carefully constructed worldview crumbling into dust. High school physics class, he repeated mechanically. Sure, Dr. Henderson said. Reality manipulation is fundamental to human space travel. How else would you expect to get around the galaxy efficiently? The alien admiral looked around the conference table at beings who treated the rewriting of physical laws as a minor technical skill taught to teenagers. His voice, when he found it again, came out as barely more than a whisper. What level of technology do your military vessels possess? The three humans exchanged glances that suggested they found this question amusing, for reasons the aliens couldn't begin to understand. Captain Sullivan answered with obvious reluctance, as if discussing something embarrassing. Admiral, you should understand that the Liberty and Defiance are civilian vessels. We're explorers, researchers, and cargo haulers. These ships represent basic transportation technology. Basic transportation, Admiral Zixter echoed hollowly. The ships you've seen are essentially the spacefaring equivalent of family cars, Dr. Henderson explained helpfully. Reliable, efficient, and equipped with standard safety features, but nothing particularly sophisticated. Engineer Martinez shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Admiral, our actual military vessels are classified, but I can tell you that Earth's defense fleet operates on significantly more advanced principles than anything you've observed today. Such as, Dr. Rixandra asked with the tone of someone who no longer believed she wanted to know the answer. Well, Dr. Henderson said carefully, proper warships can exist in multiple universes simultaneously, travel backward through cause and effect chains, and convince hostile weapons that they were never fired in the first place. Things like that. The conference room fell into absolute silence, except for the quiet hum of the ship's environmental systems. Admiral Zixter stared at the humans who had just casually mentioned technology that made his fleet's most advanced capabilities look like stone tools. Captain Sullivan, he said in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else. Are you telling me that your entire species treats fundamental physics as optional guidelines? Not optional, Sullivan corrected gently. Flexible. Physics is more like a rough draft that can be edited when necessary. Most human ships carry reality adjustment equipment as standard safety gear. Dr. Henderson nodded enthusiastically. It's amazing how many problems become manageable once you stop assuming that the universe has to work the same way all the time. Admiral Zixter looked around his conference room at technology that represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization, then back at three humans who had just explained that they could rewrite reality on a whim and considered it basic equipment for civilian vessels. I need to contact my superiors, he said in a voice that seemed to echo from the bottom of a very deep well. Captain Sullivan stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. Of course, Admiral. We'll be happy to wait while you make your reports. Take all the time you need. As the humans left the conference room, Admiral Zixter remained seated at the table, staring at the space where impossible beings had just explained that everything he thought he knew about the universe was laughably primitive. His worldview hadn't just cracked. It had been completely demolished and replaced with something so much stranger that his mind refused to process it fully. Admiral Zixter remained alone in the conference room for exactly 47 minutes after the humans departed, staring at the polished table surface while his mind struggled to process what he had just learned. The revelation that reality itself was apparently negotiable had left him in a state that his species' psychology texts would classify as acute cognitive displacement syndrome. His communications officer's voice eventually broke through his stupor. Admiral, We're receiving multiple contacts from the outer system. More human vessels are approaching. The alien commander forced himself to stand and return to the bridge, though each step felt like walking through a nightmare that refused to end. His main display now showed 5 additional human ships, materializing from what the aliens had learned to recognize as the humans. Casual disregard for conventional faster-than-light travel. Captain Betty Clark announced her arrival from the UES Ranger with the same cheerful confidence that seemed universal among human starship commanders. Jake, Ron, good to see you folks made contact with our new neighbors. How are the diplomatic talks going? Captain Sullivan's voice carried obvious satisfaction as he responded. Pretty well, Betty. Admiral Zixter has been very patient with our explanations about human navigation systems. I think we're making real progress toward mutual understanding. Admiral Zixter listened to this exchange while watching his tactical display populate with human vessels that represented impossibilities made manifest. Each new ship demonstrated capabilities that should have required theoretical breakthroughs his civilization wouldn't achieve for millennia. Commander Steve Miller's voice joined the conversation from the UES Falcon. Sorry, we're late to the party, everyone. Had to stop and help a cargo hauler that was having engine trouble. Poor thing was stuck using conventional physics and couldn't figure out why his hyperspace calculations weren't working. The casual mention of helping someone who was stuck using conventional physics struck Admiral Zixter like a physical blow. These beings discussed the fundamental forces of the universe, the way his people might talk about choosing different routes through a city. Captain Linda Turner's arrival aboard the UES Eagle provided the next demonstration of human indifference to natural law. Her ship approached the gathering by briefly existing as a 2-dimensional object, sliding between the alien fleet formations like a piece of paper moving through a 3-dimensional maze. Sorry for the unusual approach, Turner announced as her ship resumed normal dimensions. Had to navigate through some tight spaces and 3-dimensional movement seemed inefficient. Dr. Rixandra turned to Admiral Zixter with the expression of someone whose scientific worldview had been thoroughly destroyed. Sir, their ship just compressed itself into 2 dimensions and then expanded back to 3. According to our sensors, it maintained full structural integrity throughout the transition. Of course it did, Admiral Zixter replied in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. Captain Clark demonstrated the next impossibility by having her ship, the UES Ranger, phase through a nearby asteroid as if the massive rock were made of mist. She emerged on the other side without slowing down and announced cheerfully that the asteroid had interesting mineral compositions that might be worth studying later. Betty, that's useful information, Captain Sullivan said approvingly. We should definitely send a geology team when we have time. The final demonstration of human technological superiority came when Commander Miller mentioned that his ship needed routine maintenance. Instead of returning to a base or deploying external repair equipment, the UES Vulcan simply created a perfect duplicate of itself and began performing maintenance on its own engines while continuing normal operations. Always easier to work on yourself when you can be in 2 places at once, Miller explained to his fellow captains, as if this statement made perfect sense. Admiral Zixter watched his instruments register 2 identical ships, one of which was somehow repairing the other while both remained fully operational. His tactical officer reported that both vessels showed complete quantum signatures and independent existence, despite being obviously the same ship working on itself. Admiral, Dr. Rixandra called with the tone of someone reporting the end of the world. Captain Turner's ship is now reversing entropy in its local space. The debris from earlier maneuvers is spontaneously reassembling into undamaged components. The alien Admiral turned to watch Captain Turner's vessel surrounded by a field effect that caused cosmic dust and micrometeorites to organize themselves into useful materials. Broken atoms were reforming into perfect molecular structures, while random particles aligned themselves into ordered patterns. Turner always was good with cleanup operations, Captain Hayes observed with obvious admiration. Remember that time she convinced a black hole to give back all the matter it had absorbed? That was impressive work, Captain Sullivan agreed, though I still think her best achievement was teaching that neutron star to rotate backward. Admiral. Zixter felt something inside his mind make a small snapping sound as he processed the casual mention of convincing black holes to reverse their fundamental nature and teaching neutron stars to violate conservation of angular momentum. Captain Sullivan, he called over the communication channel, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone who had surrendered all hope of understanding. I must ask you directly. Are these vessels representative of standard human technology? Sullivan's face appeared on the main screen, showing genuine concern for the alien admiral's mental state. Admiral, I hope you understand that everything you've seen today represents basic civilian technology. The ships you're observing are explorers, researchers, and cargo haulers. We're essentially spacefaring merchants and scientists. Merchants and scientists, Admiral Zixter repeated mechanically. That's right, Dr. Henderson added, appearing alongside Sullivan. Admiral, I should mention that Earth maintains a proper defense fleet for system security. Those vessels operate on principles that are significantly more advanced than anything you've observed today. Captain Turner's voice joined the conversation with obvious reluctance. Admiral, our military ships can exist in multiple universes. Simultaneously, travel backward through cause and effect chains, and convince hostile weapons that they were never manufactured in the first place. We prefer not to discuss defense capabilities in detail. The bridge of the alien flagship fell into complete silence, except for the quiet sounds of electronic systems that suddenly seemed primitive and inadequate. Admiral Zixter stared at his displays, showing human vessels that treated the laws of physics as polite suggestions, while their captains discussed technology that made his fleet look like ancient history. Communications, he said in a voice that seemed to echo from a great distance. Prepare a message to Confederation Command. His communications officer worked quickly to establish the quantum link to headquarters, while Admiral Zixter composed what would become the most important report in galactic history. Confederation Command. This is Admiral Zixter of the 3rd Sector Fleet. I am submitting my immediate resignation from military service effective immediately. I am also recommending that humanity be classified as a physics-optional species, and that all future contact be handled exclusively by the diplomatic corps rather than military personnel. He paused, looking around his bridge at technology that had seemed advanced just hours ago, but now appeared laughably primitive. Furthermore, I recommend that our scientific databases be updated to reflect the fact that the universe is apparently much stranger and more terrifying than we previously understood. The laws of physics, as we know them, are evidently just suggestions that can be ignored by species with sufficient creativity and complete disregard for what we consider possible. Admiral Zixter transmitted the message and then sat back in his command chair, watching the human vessels continue their peaceful activities while his understanding of reality finished its complete collapse. Meanwhile, Captain Sullivan made his final log entry about the encounter, noting the interesting aliens they had met and expressing hope for future cultural exchange. He mentioned that the Galactic Confederation seemed to have a very rigid approach to physics that might benefit from human perspectives on creative problem-solving. Both fleets eventually parted ways, the aliens fleeing to report their encounter with reality-bending humans, while the humans continued their mission to explore strange new worlds, completely unaware that they had just redefined what was possible in the galaxy and broken an alien admiral's sanity in the process.